My name is Margaret. I am 68 years old, and just yesterday, I buried my beloved husband, Richard. 40 years we had together, a lifetime measured in shared laughter, quiet comfort, and the steady rhythm of our days. Our little Vermont home, nestled among the maples, was a sanctuary, a testament to the life we built. The funeral had been a blur of tear-streaked faces, hushed condolences, and the heavy scent of lilies. I'd moved through it on autopilot, my heart a raw, open wound, barely able to register the outpouring of support from friends and neighbors. I had returned to the house, our house, in a daze, the silence amplifying the gaping hole Richard had left behind. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow cast by the afternoon sun, seemed to echo his absence. I found myself drifting from room to room, touching his favorite armchair, running a hand over the worn spine of a book he'd been reading, a futile attempt to grasp at the remnants of him. Grief, I was discovering, wasn't a sudden deluge but a relentless tide, pulling at the edges of my sanity. I was sitting at the kitchen table, a half-empty mug of tea growing cold before me, when the doorbell chimed. It was Heather, my daughter-in-law, and my son, Ethan. They had been at the funeral, of course, offering their condolences, but there was a stiffness to their presence now, an unusual formality that set my teeth on edge. Heather, always impeccably dressed, even in mourning, clutched a designer handbag, her eyes, usually so animated, holding a peculiar, almost calculating glint. Ethan, my only son, stood a step behind her. His usually open face a mask I couldn't quite decipher. A knot of unease began to tighten in my stomach. I offered them coffee, a weak attempt at normalcy, but Heather waved it away with a dismissive hand. "Margaret," she began, her voice crisp, cutting through the heavy silence of the house. I braced myself, expecting words of comfort, perhaps an offer to help with the mountain of thank you notes that lay ahead. But what followed was a sentence that landed like a slap across my face, shattering the fragile peace I was trying to maintain. "Now that Richard is gone, you'll need to find somewhere else to live." The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I stared at her, my mind scrambling to process what I had just heard. Was this some cruel joke? A misunderstanding? My gaze flickered to Ethan, seeking reassurance, a hint of protest, but he simply stood there, a half-smile playing on his lips, a smile that seemed to mock my confusion. My heart, already bruised and battered, seemed to crack a little further. "The house is mine now, Mom," Ethan added, his voice unervingly calm, devoid of any warmth or empathy. His words, delivered with such an unsettling casualness, felt like a betrayal. This house, the one Richard and I had built together, the one filled with 40 years of memories, was suddenly no longer mine. It was a cold, hard declaration, delivered without preamble, without a shred of compassion. The full weight of their words crashed down on me, a wave of shock and hurt. I felt a strange, detached sensation, as if I were observing the scene from outside my own body. The pain was immense, but intertwined with it was a flicker of something else, a perverse sense of disbelief, almost amusement, at the sheer audacity of it all. This was real. This was happening. My son, my own flesh and blood, was telling me to leave my home, the home where I had raised him. I looked from Heather's unyielding face to Ethan's inscrutable one. There was no anger, no shouting, no dramatic outburst from me. Just a profound, quiet resignation. What was there to argue about? Their decision, whatever its twisted logic, seemed final. A soft chuckle escaped my lips, a sound that held a universe of heartbreak within its quiet confines. It wasn't a laugh of joy, but one of disbelief, a brittle echo of the life that had just been irrevocably altered. It was the only response I could muster, a shield against the torrent of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. I didn't say a word, didn't utter a single protest. There was no point. Their minds were clearly made up. I don't remember the exact moment I decided to pack, but the choice felt strangely simple, almost inevitable. There was no point in arguing, no use in pleading. Their words had made it painfully clear. I was no longer welcome in the home that had been the backdrop to my entire adult life. The initial shock had given way to a strange, almost serene acceptance. What was the alternative? To beg for a place in my own home, to live under the silent judgment of my son and his wife. Well, that wasn't the Margaret that Richard had loved, the strong, independent woman he had cherished. So, with a soft chuckle that truly did hide a profound ache, a heartbreak that felt as vast as the Vermont sky, I began to move. I walked through the house one last time, not lingering, not allowing myself the luxury of wallowing in nostalgia. Each room held 1,000 memories, but I focused on the task at hand, on the quiet act of disentanglement. In the bedroom, I opened the closet, the familiar scent of Richard's shirts still faintly clinging to the fabric. I didn't take much. Just a few practical items. A comfortable pair of jeans, a couple of sweaters, a nightgown. The simple, everyday things. I left behind the heirlooms, the photo albums, the trinkets that mark significant moments. They felt heavy, anchors to a life that, in this moment, felt irrevocably severed. I wasn't running away from memories. I was simply choosing not to carry them with me as I stepped into an unknown future. The small suitcase I pulled from the top shelf was an old, well-worn fabric one, a relic from a time when Richard and I would take weekend trips to the coast. It felt lighter than air as I laid it on the bed. My hands moved with a quiet efficiency, folding each item neatly, my mind a blank canvas, refusing to engage with the enormity of what was happening. I packed my toothbrush, a small bottle of lotion, the essentials. No grand gestures, no dramatic farewells. The only thing of true sentimental value I took was the small, worn silver locket Richard had given me on our 10th anniversary. It held tiny photos of us, younger, full of hope, and I tucked it into my pocket, close to my heart. Ethan and Heather were still in the living room, their voices a low murmur, but I paid them no mind. They were a distant echo, a problem that had already been resolved, at least in my own mind. I didn't need their permission, their explanation, or their pity. I had myself. And in that moment that felt like enough. I grabbed my car keys from the hook by the door, the familiar weight of them a small comfort. My purse, already packed with my wallet and phone, was slung over my shoulder. The drive to the motel was short, just a few miles down the road. It was a nondescript place, one of those roadside establishments that caters to travelers passing through, a place of temporary refuge. I checked in under my maiden name, a small act of reclaiming a part of myself that had been dormant for decades. The room was clean, impersonal, and blessedly quiet. A queen-sized bed, a small television, a worn armchair. It was a far cry from the cozy familiarity of my own home, but it was a space, a blank slate where I could simply be. I set my suitcase on the luggage rack, pulled out my nightgown, and got ready for bed. The silence of the motel room was a stark contrast to the echoing emptiness of the house I had just left. Here there were no ghosts, no memories clinging to the walls, just the quiet hum of the air conditioning. I lay in bed, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, the events of the day replaying in my mind like a muted film. There was no anger, not truly. Just a deep, profound sadness and a weary sense of wonder at the unpredictable turns life takes. I drifted off to sleep, the quiet hum of the air conditioning a lullaby to my newfound solitude. I had simply laughed, then moved out. It was done. I slept deeply that night, a sleep of sheer exhaustion, both physical and emotional. When I finally stirred, the soft morning light was filtering through the motel curtains. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of confusion, disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. Then the events of the previous day rushed back, a wave of cold reality. Richard was gone. My home was gone. I was here. I reached for my phone on the bedside table, half expecting to see a message from Chloe, my daughter who lived in California, checking in, but the screen was dark. I sighed, a quiet breath of melancholy. I suppose everyone had their own grief to process, their own lives to get back to, even family. I got up, stretched, and made myself a cup of the complimentary coffee from the in-room machine. It was weak, watery, but hot, and I nursed it slowly, staring out the window at the parking lot, watching cars come and go. The world outside continued its rhythm, oblivious to the seismic shift in my own life. I thought about what I would do next. My pension from teaching was modest, but it was enough to live on. Had some savings. I could find a small apartment, perhaps even another little house, somewhere quiet. Vermont had always been my home, and I wasn't ready to leave its gentle embrace. I would start fresh. It was a daunting prospect, but surprisingly, not entirely without a strange sense of liberation. The slate, after all, was clean. Just as I was contemplating a trip to the local diner for a proper breakfast, my phone buzzed, startling me. It was Ethan. I stared at the screen, a knot of apprehension tightening in my stomach. What could he possibly want? Another curt dismissal. A demand for something I'd inadvertently left behind. I let it ring, watching the name flash on the screen, a familiar name that now carried an unfamiliar sting. The buzzing stopped, only to start again almost immediately. This time it was Heather. My eyebrow raised. This was unusual. They had made their point. Why the sudden barrage? I ignored that call too. Perhaps they were just checking if I had actually left. A grim chuckle escaped me. Yes, I had left. As requested. I walked over to the small window, pulling back the curtains slightly, observing the gray morning sky. It looked like it might rain. Just as I turned away, the phone started its relentless clamor again. This time it was Chloe. Now this was truly perplexing. Chloe rarely called at this hour, and certainly not right after Ethan and Heather had tried to reach me. My children were hardly a synchronized calling team. Something was clearly amiss. The phone kept ringing, a persistent, demanding buzz that filled the small motel room. Ethan again, then Heather again, then Chloe's name flashing insistently. It was like a frantic symphony of unanswered questions. My initial calm began to fray at the edges. What if something was wrong? My maternal instincts, dormant for a day, began to stir. Was there an emergency? Had something happened to one of them? Despite the hurt of the previous day, they were still my children, my blood. Finally, with a sigh of exasperation and a flicker of genuine concern, I picked up. It was Ethan. His voice, usually so steady, was laced with an frantic edge I hadn't heard in years. "Mom, thank goodness you answered. Where are you? We've been calling non-stop." He sounded genuinely distressed, a stark contrast to his composure of yesterday. My mind raced, trying to make sense of his agitation. "I'm at the Evergreen Motel, Ethan. Where else would I be? You told me to leave." My voice was flat, devoid of emotion, a deliberate choice. I wanted him to hear the stark reality of his words, stripped of any sugarcoating. There was a pause on the other end, a beat of silence filled with a sharp intake of breath. Then I heard Heather's voice in the background, muffled but distinct. "She's at the motel?" "Oh, Ethan, no." And then Ethan's voice again, softer now, laced with an almost desperate plea. "Mom, please, you have to come back. We need to talk. There's been a terrible misunderstanding." A terrible misunderstanding. My brow furrowed. What could possibly be misunderstood about being told to find somewhere else to live, and that the house is mine now? The words had been clear, precise, cutting. I felt a surge of weary skepticism. Misunderstanding, Ethan? It seemed pretty clear to me yesterday. I kept my tone even, but there was an underlying current of disbelief. His frantic tone was at odds with the casual cruelty of yesterday. Something was definitely not adding up, and a tiny spark of curiosity, despite my weariness, began to ignite. Ethan insisted that I stay put, promising to be at the motel within minutes. Heather's voice, now clearly audible in the background, was a flurry of distressed apologies and urgent pleas for me to wait. I agreed, if only out of a morbid curiosity to understand this bewildering shift in their demeanor. The short drive must have felt like an eternity to them, for within what felt like mere moments, a frantic knock sounded at my motel room door. I opened it to find Ethan and Heather standing there, looking utterly distraught. Ethan's usually neatly combed hair was disheveled, and his eyes, typically so guarded, were wide with what looked suspiciously like genuine panic. Heather, usually so composed, had tear tracks visible on her cheeks, her perfectly applied makeup a little smudged. They looked nothing like the cold, calculating figures who had delivered their eviction notice just yesterday. This was a different Ethan, a different Heather, and the stark contrast unsettled me almost as much as their initial pronouncement. "Mom, oh thank goodness," Ethan blurted out, rushing forward as if to embrace me, then stopping awkwardly, as if unsure of my reception. Heather, equally flustered, wrung her hands. "Margaret, we are so sorry," Heather began, her voice cracking with emotion. "You must think we're absolutely terrible people. Please let us explain." I stepped aside, allowing them to enter the cramped motel room. They looked around, their expressions a mixture of relief at finding me and discomfort at the sparse surroundings. I gestured to the 2 available chairs. "Well, I'm listening," I said, my voice still flat, betraying none of the swirling emotions within me. I was hurt, yes, but also intrigued. What possible explanation could there be for such a stark reversal? Ethan took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. "Mom, yesterday was supposed to be a surprise. A really big, really good surprise. We've been planning it for months, ever since Dad's diagnosis worsened." He paused, looking at Heather, who nodded encouragingly. "We bought you a house, Mom. A beautiful little lake house just a few minutes from here. We wanted you to have your own space, your own place to call home, especially now that Dad's gone." His voice faltered on the last word, and I saw genuine grief flicker in his eyes. My mind reeled. A house. A lake house. The words echoed in the small room, struggling to make sense of the jarring disconnect between their previous cruelty and this astonishing revelation. "A house," I repeated, the incredulity evident in my tone. Heather stepped forward, her voice soft and earnest. "Yes, Margaret. A charming little place by Lake Champlain. It has a lovely porch and a small garden, just like you always wanted. We closed on it last month. The plan was for Ethan to make a joke about the house being his, and then I was going to follow up with, because we got you your own place. It was meant to be light-hearted, a way to gently transition, to show you that you wouldn't be alone, that you'd have your own independent space. But we messed it up. Royally." She swallowed hard, tears welling up in her eyes again. "The timing was awful, we know that. You were grieving and we were so nervous about getting the surprise right, about not spoiling it. We just blurted it out like idiots. We are so incredibly sorry for the pain we caused you." Ethan nodded vehemently. "It was supposed to be a light-hearted joke, Mom. My way of saying the house was mine now, as in I'd be taking care of it, and you wouldn't have to worry about the upkeep anymore. And Heather was supposed to follow up with the good news immediately. But then, you just laughed, and you left. We stood there stunned. We kept thinking you'd realize that you'd come back, that it was obvious we were joking. But when you didn't and your phone wasn't answering, we panicked. We thought we had truly alienated you." He looked genuinely devastated. The pieces began to click into place, a horrifyingly misplaced puzzle. The awkwardness, Ethan's half-smile that wasn't a smirk but a nervous twitch, Heather's stiff formality. It all made a terrible, twisted kind of sense. They hadn't been cruel. They had been incredibly, monumentally clumsy. My heart, which had been a tightly wound ball of hurt, slowly began to unfurl. The anger, the sense of betrayal, began to dissipate, replaced by a profound wave of understanding, and yes, a touch of weary amusement. "So," I said, a faint smile finally touching my lips. "My own lake house?" Heather's face lit up with a fragile hope. "Yes, and it's beautiful, Margaret. We think you'll love it." Chloe helped pick out some of the furniture. She's been beside herself with worry since we told her what happened this morning. She called us practically screaming when she couldn't reach you. She thought we had completely lost our minds. A small, genuine chuckle escaped me this time. Chloe, my sensible, direct daughter, would indeed have been beside herself. The relief in the room was almost palpable. The tension that had held us all captive for the past 24 hours began to dissolve, replaced by a tentative thread of healing. The air in the motel room, once thick with unspoken tension, was now light, almost buoyant. The relief on Ethan and Heather's faces was palpable, transforming their features from strained masks to open, vulnerable expressions. I looked from one to the other, a wave of tenderness washing over me. They were my family, and despite this monumental, albeit clumsy, misstep, their intentions had been rooted in love. It was a chaotic, ill-timed expression of it, but love nonetheless. "Well," I said, a genuine smile finally gracing my lips. "Next time say exactly what you mean, darling. You know I'm not a mind reader." The lightness in my voice was a clear signal that the deepest hurt had begun to heal. It wasn't an accusation, but a gentle admonishment, delivered with the warmth only a mother can convey. Heather let out a shaky laugh, tears still glistening in her eyes. "Oh, Mom, we learned that lesson the hard way. Believe me." Ethan, visibly relaxed, even managed a sheepish grin. "We truly thought you'd get it, Mom. We had it all rehearsed, but then you just walked out and we were left speechless." He shook his head, a mix of disbelief and self-reproach in his gaze. "We've been beside ourselves. Chloe was furious with us, demanding we tell her where you were. She was ready to fly out here and give us a piece of her mind." I chuckled, picturing Chloe, always the most direct and no-nonsense of my children, taking them to task. "I can imagine," I said, a soft warmth spreading through me. "She always was quick to defend her old mother." Within the hour, we were driving to my new lake house. Ethan had insisted on showing me immediately, eager to erase the bitter taste of the previous day. The drive was short, just as he'd said, and as we pulled up the gravel driveway, my breath caught in my throat. It was indeed a charming little place. Nestled among mature trees, with a wraparound porch that overlooked a shimmering expanse of Lake Champlain, it was everything I hadn't realized I needed. The house itself was modest, a cozy two-bedroom, but it exuded a welcoming warmth. Large windows promised abundant natural light and breathtaking views. Inside, the house was tastefully furnished, clearly chosen with care. A comfortable sofa faced a stone fireplace, and a small, well-equipped kitchen beckoned. There were even some books on the shelves, a thoughtful touch. Chloe's influence was evident in a vibrant throw blanket draped over an armchair and a few whimsical pieces of art on the walls. It wasn't the house Richard and I had built, but it felt like a fresh canvas, ready for new memories to be painted upon it. We settled into the living room, the lake glistening outside the windows. Heather, still looking a bit teary but now genuinely relieved, made a pot of coffee, and we sat around the quaint kitchen table, mugs steaming in our hands. The conversation flowed easily, no longer strained by unspoken anxieties. We talked about Richard, sharing fond memories, and the grief, while still present, felt softened by the renewed connection between us. Ethan explained the details of the property, the quiet community, the nearby walking trails. Heather described the local farmers market and the charming little bookstore in town. They had truly thought of everything, anticipating my needs and desires with a foresight I hadn't expected. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, casting a warm golden glow across the lake, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. Life had thrown me a curveball, a painful, bewildering one, but it had also, unexpectedly, offered me a fresh start. My husband was gone, and the home we shared was no longer mine, but I had a beautiful new sanctuary, and more importantly, I had my children. They had erred, yes, but their hearts were in the right place. We had navigated the treacherous waters of misunderstanding, and emerged, not unscathed, but stronger, appreciating each other more than ever. This little lake house, far from being a symbol of loss, became a beacon of new beginnings, a testament to the enduring, albeit sometimes complicated, bonds of family. And as the evening deepened, I knew, with a quiet certainty, that Richard would have loved it here. And he would have been proud. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, painting the lake in hues of orange and purple, a profound sense of peace settled over me. Life, in its unpredictable wisdom, had taken away one cherished chapter but opened the door to another, filled with new possibilities and the enduring warmth of family. My heart, once heavy with grief and a fleeting sense of betrayal, now felt light, brimming with gratitude and a renewed sense of belonging. The quiet ripple of the lake outside my window was a gentle reminder that even after the storm, serenity can be found, and that sometimes, the most unexpected turns lead to the most beautiful destinations.